The cold dark of space was silent, but the silence was a lie. A faint signal moved through the black, carrying with it the last hope of an entire world. It came from Thryn, a green-blue planet that once shone bright among the stars. It was burning. Cities that had stood for thousands of years lay broken, their towers torn down by weapons the Thryn had never seen before. In orbit, the remains of their defense fleet drifted like broken bones. The air on the surface tasted of smoke and metal, and the ground shook with each distant explosion. Every heartbeat brought the enemy closer in the great council chamber. The surviving leaders argued in voices sharp with fear. They spoke of the Verkle, creatures of iron and fire who left nothing alive behind them. The Thryn had fought hard, but their weapons were useless. Entire armies had vanished in hours. The Verkle did not want prisoners, only ash. And now the council knew their world would fall. The only question was, when an old diplomat, her face lined by years of hard service, stood and silenced the room. She spoke of a rumor whispered between traders and smugglers. There was a world far away, a planet so dangerous that even its own native life was a threat. The beings who lived there were stronger than any species known. They were not kind. They were not gentle, but they could win wars. The traders had a name for them. Deathworlders. The council knew the name, and they feared it. Yet fear was all they had left to lose. Against the protests of some, the council sent a signal into the void. It carried a simple message. Help us. We'll give you anything. We will serve. Just help us before it is too late. The diplomat's hands trembled as she pressed the send key. Once sent, the message could not be taken back. All they could do now is wait. Lighters away on the human homeworld. The signal reached a military listening post buried deep beneath ice and rock. Technicians read the data, their eyes narrowing at the name of the sender. Orders moved quickly, passing from desk to desk, from officer to officer. In the capital's war council, the request was played aloud. The room fell silent when they heard the desperation in the alien voice. It was not the first time humans had been asked for help. But most requests came from those who did not understand what humans truly were. The military high command met in a sealed chamber. Generals and admirals sat in shadow, their faces hidden. From the light, there were other ways they could answer the Thryn's call. They could send advisors, could send weapons. They could send nothing at all. But the vote was unanimous. The Thryn had asked the Deathworlders for help. The Deathworlders would send their answer. Deep in a secure facility, far from any city, a single hangar door began to open. Air was cold and smelled faintly of oil. Massive shapes stood in the darkness, half hidden by steam. Its armor was black and scarred, and its eyes, if they could be called that, glowed faint red. For years it had been silent, locked away, because no one wanted to see it used again. But today, the locks fell away, and the machine awoke. Servos groaned, steel joints flexed. In the control room above, a man stepped forward. Captain Rourke was tall, his face marked by thin white scars that told stories no one dared ask about. His eyes were the color of old ice, and when he looked at the machine, there was no fear in them. He had been its pilot once before, in a war humanity never spoke of. The others in the room watched him in silence as he placed his hand on the control panel. The machine's systems came alive, and somewhere deep in its core a sound rose low at first, then growing into something like a growl. The sound did not come from speakers. It came from the machine itself. On Thryn, the alien council waited. For a reply, days passed. The sky above their capital city grew darker with the shadows of enemy warships. The people whispered in the streets, asking why no help had come. The diplomat who had sent the signal tried to keep hope alive, but inside she feared they had been ignored. The Verkle were moving faster now, burning entire provinces overnight. The capital had only hours left. Then, in the deep of night, the sky tore open. A single ship descended through the clouds, its hull black and without markings. It did not come in gently. It came like a spear hurled from the heavens. The alien guards at the landing site raised their weapons, but the heat rolling off the ship made them lower them again. A ramp slammed down onto the scorched landing pad, and from the smoke stepped Captain Rourke. His armor was battered but strong and at his back. The massive black shape of the machine followed, each step shaking the ground. The Thrinn stared in silence. They had expected an army. They had expected a fleet. Instead, they had been sent. A single man and a monster of steel. No one spoke. The Verkel-S ships were already on their way. The alien diplomat stepped forward, trying to hide the doubt in her voice as she asked if he had come alone. Rourke's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. "I didn't come to save you," he said. "I came to kill them." Ground trembled again, but this time it was not from the machine. Above the city, the enemy fleet had arrived. The night sky lit up with the fire of descending weapons, and in that light the machine's black armor gleamed like the hide of some great beast from another world. The Verkel had no idea what had just been said against them, and in the shadows behind Captain Rourke's calm eyes, the war monster was already hungry. The alien envoy had seen many kinds of soldiers in her life: tall insectoid warriors from the J-Car hives, armored reptilian shock troops from the Vex colonies, even the merciless androids of the Null, but she had never seen anything like the human war machine now walking beside her. It moved with a slow, heavy rhythm, each footstep punching cracks into the landing pad. The air around it shimmered from the heat of its engines. Its armor was dark, almost black, marked with scars from battles so old the Thrinn had no record of them. Weapons lined its arms and shoulders, and its head was small compared to its hulking body, almost like the creature was lowering itself, as if hunting. The humans called it Cerberus. Inside its chest, sealed in a cockpit of steel and light, sat Captain Rourke. His hands moved easily over the controls, as though guiding a living creature instead of a machine. His face was calm, but his eyes scanned the sky. He knew the enemy would not wait. The Thrinn officers gathered near the platform, whispering among themselves in their soft, clicking language. They had sent for help, for protection, for someone who would guard their people. Instead, they had been sent a single Deathworlder and a war machine that radiated danger. The diplomat forced herself to speak. "Captain Rourke, the Verkel are many, their fleet numbers in the hundreds." "You cannot, you called Deathworlders," he interrupted, his voice low but steady. "We don't come to lose." Before she could answer, a sharp alarm cut through the air. The Thrinn command center's holoscreens lit up with red symbols. The enemy fleet had arrived in orbit. Dozens of Verkel ships appeared above the planet, blotting out the stars.
Ow.
Some began their descent toward the capital. The diplomat turned to Rourke. "We have defenses." He was already moving. The Cerberus turned toward the nearest street, its engines flaring as it powered up. The Thrinn soldiers stepped back as the ground shook above the city. The first Verkel dropships pierced the clouds, their hulls blackened from entering the atmosphere at deadly speed. Civilian voices screamed in the streets. The enemies. Warhorn's deep metallic blasts echoed between the buildings. Rourke's voice came through the open coms, cold and certain. "Stay behind the line. Whatever you see, don't run forward." The Verkel ships fired. Explosions ripped across the outer districts, throwing smoke into the air. The first wave of enemy soldiers hit the ground, tall armored brutes with glowing red eyes. They moved fast, cutting down anything in their path. Then the Cerberus moved. It did not march, it charged. Its engines roared, and in 3 strides it was among the Verkel. The first swipe of its arm tore through to enemy soldiers at once, their armor splitting like paper. Rourke didn't pause. His targeting systems locked on 3 dropships still hovering over the streets. A single volley of missiles streaked into the sky, and all 3 ships erupted into fire, their wreckage falling into the ruins below. The Thrinn soldiers froze in shock. The way humans fought was nothing like they had imagined. There was no hesitation, no careful retreat, no measured response. There was only forward motion, attack after attack until nothing was left standing. One Thrinn officer muttered he fights like the stories say they do. The diplomat swallowed hard. She had heard those stories too. On Deathworlds, there was no room for the weak. Everything that survived had teeth. Rourke's voice came through the coms again, quieter, Now, this is just the first wave. They'll send more, and I'll kill every last one. High above them, the Verkal command ship shifted in orbit. A new signal pulsed across their network, a warning to their entire armada. Deathworlders sighted. Engage with extreme caution. The war was only beginning. The Verkal's second wave came fast, faster than any sane army would dare move. Dozens of dropships broke from orbit, black streaks cutting across the red sky. The ground trembled as more of their soldiers poured into the city streets, their armor clanging like iron drums. Buildings cracked under the weight of their assault. The Thryn lines were already bending. From the cockpit of Cerberus, Rourke saw it all. His eyes tracked enemy movements with a cold precision, every muscle ready. The Verkal were aggressive, but they weren't unpredictable, not to him. Predators were always the same. They struck hard, they struck fast, and they believed. Fear alone would finish the fight. He keyed his come. Pull your people back behind the central plaza. Seal every side street. If they break formation, I'll cut them down. The Thryn commander hesitated, but one look at Cerberus tearing through the first wave convinced him. Orders were relayed. Alien soldiers fell back, their weapons shaking in their hands. The enemy advanced. This time, they brought heavier weapons. Plasma cannons that hissed and spat green fire, blast lances that could shatter armored vehicles. A dozen Verkal warriors formed a wedge, charging straight toward Cerberus. Rourke grinned without humor. Let's see how you like this. Drove Cerberus forward, each step a thunderclap on the shattered pavement. At the last second, he twisted the massive frame sideways, letting the wedge close in, and then unleashed a spinning strike from the war machine's arm-mounted blade. Metal screamed. 4 Verkal fell in pieces before they could even react. The rest scattered under the sudden, brutal assault. Overhead, a dropship tried to flank the city's defenses. Rourke's targeting systems locked, and Cerberus launched a cluster of micromissiles. The craft erupted mid-air, debris raining down on its own troops. From a rooftop vantage point, the Thryn diplomat watched with wide, unblinking eyes. She had seen battles before, long drawn-out fights where each side fought for every meter of ground. This was different. This was not a battle. It was a hunt. The human war machine moved like it was born for this, as if the chaos itself was its natural home. But the Verkal weren't finished. Across the plaza, a massive armored figure emerged from a landing craft, nearly matching Cerberus in height. Its plating was jagged, its arms ending in cruel-bladed weapons. The Verkal troops roared in approval as their champions stepped forward. Rourke's sensors tagged it instantly. Berserker class. Inside the cockpit, his hands tightened on the controls. Finally, something interesting. The Verkal champion bellowed and charged, the ground shattering under its weight. Cerberus met it head-on. The impact shook the plaza, sending a shockwave through the nearby streets. Blade met blade, sparks flying in arcs of light. Thryn soldiers could only watch as the two giants tore into each other, every strike loud enough to make their bones vibrate. The champion's blows were fast, but Cerberus was faster. Rourke ducked under a swing, driving his machine's fist into the enemy's torso hard enough to dent the armor. The Verkal reeled, but it did not fall. It came again, slashing at Cerberus's shoulder and tearing deep into its armor. Warning lights flashed across Rourke's displays. He didn't slow down. He drove forward, using the damage as bait. "Got you," he muttered, when the champion lunged for the exposed joint. Rourke pivoted Cerberus sharply, locking the enemy's weapon arm in a crushing grip. He powered the servos to maximum, and with a wrenching twist, tore the arm free. The Verkal champion roared in rage, staggering back. One last strike, a blade through its chest, and it fell, shaking the plaza with its final crash. The Verkal troops froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, without warning, they began to retreat, dragging their wounded back toward the dropships. The Thryn commander turned to the diplomat. "They fear him." The diplomat nodded slowly. But in her heart, she was not sure if the fear was for the Verkal, or for the human they had brought to their world. Above them, In the enemy's orbital command ship, a voice crackled over. "There comes. Deploy the Harbinger." High above Thrin, the Verkal flagship hung like a black blade against the stars. Inside its shadowed command hall, the air was tense. Massive warriors stood at rigid attention as their warlords studied. The battle reports. Dozens of dropships destroyed, hundreds of soldiers dead, and all by one enemy. The warlord's claws clicked against the armrest of his throne. "The Deathworlder," he growled, the word like poison in his mouth. "I told you what would happen if we pushed them." One of his captains bowed low. "We underestimated him, my lord." The machine he pilots, the warlord slammed his hand down, the sound echoing through the hall. "It is not the machine. It is the human inside. Send in the Harbinger." A ripple of unease passed through the officers. Even the Verkal were wary of that name. Far below, in a hidden hangar deep within the flagship's core, something stirred. Massive doors rolled open, revealing a figure. Far older and darker than any of the Verkal present had seen. Its armor was blacker than void, edged with glowing red lines. Did not roar, did not growl. It simply stepped forward, each movement smooth and deliberate, like it was remembering how to walk after a long sleep. On the surface, the streets of the capital were quiet for the first time in hours. Fires burned in the distance, and smoke curled into the sky, but the Verkal had pulled back. Thrin soldiers moved cautiously through the ruins, gathering the wounded. Civilians peeked from doorways, their eyes following the towering shape of Cerberus as it moved through the city. Rourke stood outside. The machine for the first time since landing. His armor was dented and scorched, his face streaked with sweat and dust. The Thrin diplomat approached him slowly, her voice hesitant. "You've pushed them back? But why have they stopped?" "The Verkal don't retreat." "They're not retreating," Rourke said flatly. "They're making room." Before she could ask what he meant, the ground trembled with a deep, steady rhythm. Everyone turned toward the horizon. From the edge of the city, a black shape appeared, tall, thin, and impossibly fast. The fires behind it seemed dimmer, as though the light itself was afraid to touch it. Rourke's eyes narrowed. He knew the stance, the precision, the silent confidence. This was no ordinary Verkal war machine. "That's not theirs," he muttered. The diplomat frowned. "What do you mean it's human?" Rourke said. "Or it used to be." The black shape entered the plaza, stopping just outside weapons range, its head tilted slightly, studying Cerberus. Then, to the horror of every Thrin present, it spoke in perfect, unbroken human English. "Hello, Captain Rourke. It's been a long time." Rourke felt his blood run cold. The voice was smooth, almost calm, but beneath it was something ancient and merciless. Memories, he thought, were buried, clawed their way to the surface. This couldn't be here. Not now. Not alive. The Thrin soldiers raised their weapons, but Rourke didn't move. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "I destroyed you." The black machine's eyes glowed brighter. "You tried?" Before another word could be spoken, it moved. The Harbinger crossed the space between them in less than a second, blades flashing in the smoky light. Rourke leapt back into Cerberus's cockpit, sealing the hatch just as the first strike landed. Metals screamed against metal, sparks lighting the ruins like a storm. The Harbinger's attacks were faster than anything the Verkal had thrown at him. Every blow came with surgical precision, each one designed to find a weakness. Rourke countered, slamming Cerberus's arm into the Harbinger's torso and firing a close-range missile. But the black machine twisted away, letting the explosions scorch empty air. The Thrin soldiers scattered, unsure whether they were watching their savior fight, or something far worse. Up in orbit, the Verkal warlord watched the duel with an expression that could almost be called satisfaction. "Let them tear each other apart," he said. "When it's over, we'll burn whatever's left." In the streets below, the Harbinger's voice came again, cold and almost amused. "You can't protect them, Rourke. You couldn't protect anyone back then, and you won't now." Rourke tightened his grip on the controls, his voice low and steady. "This time, I finish it." The city lay under a sky the color of burnt metal. Smoke curled in thick columns from the ruins of the outer districts, and the air was heavy with the smell of ash and ozone. The Thryn capital, once proud and bright, now felt like a hunted animal. Every shadow a threat, every distant sound a warning. Somewhere beyond the black clouds, the Harbinger waited. The Verkle had pulled back after its arrival, leaving the streets eerily silent. To the Thryn, it looked like a retreat. To Rourke, it was the calm before a predator's strike. He'd fought alongside and against machines like the Harbinger before. They didn't withdraw. They stalked inside the Plaza Cerberus, stood motionless, like a sentinel carved from shadow. Rourke remained in the cockpit, eyes scanning the flickering data streams on his displays. Every so often, he caught something strange, faint energy signatures moving at the edge of detection. Here and gone in an instant. They didn't match Verkle tech. They didn't match Cerberus's own systems either. The Thryn diplomat approached from below, speaking into an open channel. People want to know if it's over. They think the Verkle have left. Rourke didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on the readouts. It's not over. They've just sent something ahead to make sure I'm where they want me. She hesitated. You mean the Harbinger? He glanced down at her through the armored glass. It's not. Just a weapon. It's older, and it's been here before. Before she could ask more, a sharp tone sounded in the cockpit. Proximity alert. Rourke's fingers moved fast across the controls, magnifying the feed from one of Cerberus's external cameras. Far to the east, a single figure stood atop a half-collapsed tower, watching. The black armor was unmistakable, the faint crimson glow along its edges like a heartbeat. The Harbinger didn't move. It was simply there, as if daring him to follow. Rourke knew better than to take the bait in open daylight. He activated Cerberus's cloaked recon drone and sent it gliding silently toward the tower. As it closed the distance, static began to bleed into the signal. The picture broke apart into jagged lines. Then, without warning, the feed went black. A second later, the Harbinger was gone. That night, the streets of the capital were empty. The Thryn locked themselves indoors, afraid to even light windows. In the command center, the remaining military officers gathered around Rourke's projected map. He marked out key choke points and fallback positions, but his attention kept drifting toward the city's northern district. The last place he'd seen the Harbinger. We can reinforce here and here, the Thryn commander said, pointing. At two narrow streets, they come from the north. The lights went out. Not just in the command center, across the entire city. Total blackout. Rourke was already moving. He sprinted back to Cerberus, sealing himself inside just as a low hum filled the air. Outside, in the darkness, faint red lines began to appear on the building's neat, precise like cuts waiting to be made. Then the first building fell. The Harbinger came out of the shadows without sound, moving like liquid darkness, cutting through the outer defenses before anyone could fire a shot. Cerberus's sensors locked onto its heat signature. But the readings jumped and shifted, as if the machine wasn't fully there. Rourke charged. The two war machines met in a narrow street, their blades sparking in the dark. The Harbinger fought. Without wasted motion, every strike aimed to cripple, every feint leading to a killing blow. Rourke countered with sheer aggression, driving Cerberus forward with brutal, hammering attacks. They crashed through walls, tearing a path through the northern district. Civilians fled in every direction, their screams drowned by the roar of tearing metal. At one point, the Harbinger caught Cerberus across the side, ripping deep into its armor. Warning lights flared red across Rourke's displays. Still, he pushed back. He managed to pin the Harbinger against a half-collapsed structure, driving Cerberus's blade into its shoulder joint. Sparks exploded, but instead of retreating, the Harbinger's head turned slowly toward him. "You're slower," it said. Voice low and cutting. "You've grown weak." Rourke twisted the blade deeper. "I only need to be strong enough to end you." Before he could finish the strike, the Harbinger triggered something, a pulse that slammed through Cerberus's systems, killing half his displays in an instant. When the vision cleared, the black machine was gone again, vanishing into the ruins. The Thryn commander's voice came over. Comes panicked. "What was that? Why didn't you finish it? Rourke's jaw tightened. Because it's not ready to be finished, and neither am I. Somewhere in the distance, the Harbinger's faint red glow blinked once, like an eye opening in the dark. The next day, the sun rose weak and pale over the ruins of the Thrin capital, its light struggling to cut through the haze of smoke that hung over the city. The people moved like ghosts, quiet and wary, flinching at every sound. They had seen the Harbinger in the night. They had seen what it could do. Even the Verkle were a terror they could understand. But this, which was something else. In the command center, the atmosphere was tense. Rourke stood before a battered holomap, reviewing the last night's battle frame by frame. The Harbinger had been playing with him, testing his reactions, studying his tactics. Every move had been deliberate. The Thrin commander leaned over the table. If it's human technology, can you shut it down? You built Cerberus. Surely I didn't build Cerberus, Rourke cut in sharply. And the Harbinger isn't just human tech. It's from before humans even had history. The diplomat frowned. Before history? Rourke's eyes stayed on the map. There was a war. Not here. Not in this galaxy. It was so far back. No one remembers, except the ones who survived it. The Harbinger was one of ours. Built to fight an enemy that's long gone. But it survived. And the longer it survives, the more it learns. The room fell silent. He turned toward them at last. The Verkle think they control it. They don't. They've just opened the cage. That evening, the first reports came in from outside. The capital. Villages gone silent. Outposts wiped out without a single distress signal. Cerberus's scanners picked up faint traces of the same energy pulse the Harbinger had used the night before. It wasn't attacking in one place. It was moving in a wide circle like it was tightening a noose. Rourke knew what that meant. It was hunting him. He ordered the Thrin military to pull their forces back into a concentrated defensive ring around the capital. Civilians were evacuated into underground shelters. Every remaining heavy weapon was set to guard the main approaches. The commander argued that this would leave the rest of the planet undefended. But Rourke shook his head. The Harbinger doesn't want the planet, he said. It wants me. Night came quickly, bringing with it the low electric hum of the Harbinger's presence. This time Rourke didn't wait for it to strike. He took Cerberus out into the dark, moving through the empty streets toward the northern ruins. The city was silent. The only sound, the thudding of the war machine's heavy steps. Halfway to the outer perimeter, his sensors caught it. A faint energy spike to the west. Then another, closer. Then another, even closer still. It was surrounding. Rourke slowed Cerberus and switched to full sensor sweep. Shapes moved at the edges of the radar, not the Harbinger, but smaller constructs, black like its armor and moving without sound. Drones. The first one struck from above, dropping onto Cerberus's back and slicing deep into the rear armor. Rourke twisted sharply, smashing it against a wall until it crumpled. Two more came in from the sides, their claws sparking as they tried to pry open Cerberus's joints. Rourke fired a burst from the shoulder cannons, tearing them apart in showers of molten metal, but for every drone he destroyed, more appeared. They didn't fight to kill him, they fought to slow him down. Then the Harbinger arrived. It stepped out from the ruins ahead, that faint red glow spilling across the broken street. For a long moment, neither moved. Then its voice carried across the distance. You're still thinking like a soldier, Rourke. I stopped being one a long time ago. It charged. The impact sent both machines crashing through the remains of a high tower, steel and stone collapsing around them. Rourke drove Cerberus's blade upward, catching the Harbinger across its chest. The cut went deep, but there was no scream, no sign of pain. The black machine simply pushed forward. Forcing him back step by step, they fought through the ruins, blows landing like thunder, until the Harbinger slammed Cerberus into the ground. With enough force to crack the street, it leaned close, its voice low. You can't win. Rourke spat blood inside his helmet, glaring at the dark shape above him. I'd rather die. The Harbinger tilted its head, almost as if amused. Then I'll make. Sure you do. Slowly. Before it could finish, Rourke triggered Cerberus's emergency overdrive. The war machine's engines roared, releasing a burst of raw power that hurled the Harbinger backward into the side of a collapsed building. Debris rained down, burying it for the moment. Rourke didn't wait to see if it would get up. He turned and ran for the capital, knowing it was only a matter of time before the Harbinger came again, and next time, it wouldn't be alone. The rain came without warning, cold and heavy, drumming against the shattered rooftops of the Thrin capital. It washed the streets clean of dust, but could not wash away the fear. In the underground shelters, civilians huddled in silence there, eyes fixed on the trembling ceiling as distant booms echoed from beyond the city walls. Rourke stood inside Cerberus, the war machine's systems humming quietly around him. The repairs had been rushed, armor plates still scorched, warning lights still flickering on half the displays, but there was no time to wait. The Harbinger would not stop. In the command center, the Thrin commander spoke quickly into the comms. Scouts report Verkal forces regrouping in the west. But there's no sign of the Harbinger. Rourke's voice was low, steady. It's not regrouping, it's positioning. Verkal aren't leading this fight anymore. The Harbinger is. The diplomat standing nearby frowned. Then why let the Verkal stay at all? It's as dangerous as you say. Because it doesn't care about them, Rourke interrupted. Their tools, distractions. It wants me focused on the wrong fight. A sudden alert blared across the room, incoming fire from the western district. Verkal artillery shells screamed overhead, striking the outer defenses. The city shook. Rourke moved instantly, Cerberus powering forward through the rain. The western streets were chaos. Verkal infantry swarmed through the narrow alleys. Plasma fire, lighting the storm in green flashes. Thrin soldiers held their lines desperately, but they were being pushed back, meter by meter. Rourke charged straight into the center of the fight. Cerberus's heavy cannons roared, shredding enemy formations. He cut through the attackers with savage precision. Tearing down dropships before they could unload their troops, the tide began to turn. The Verkal broke formation, retreating in scattered groups. The Thrin cheered too soon. From the far end of the street, a wall of dust exploded outward. Through it came the Harbinger, walking slowly, unhurried, as if the rain. And the battle meant nothing to it. Rourke's stomach tightened. There you are. The Harbinger didn't rush this time. It stopped just short of weapons range, tilting its head slightly. Do you know what I've learned in the years you've been hiding from me? It asked, its voice carrying easily. Through the storm, that mercy is weakness. And I will never make that mistake again. Rourke drove Cerberus forward without a word, and the street became an arena. The two machines clashed, blades and metal ringing in the rain. The Harbingers. Movements were sharper than before, its strikes flowing together in relentless combinations. Rourke countered with brute force, hammering back with devastating blows that sent shockwaves through the ground. But then the Harbinger changed tactics. It stopped meeting him head-on and began driving the fight sideways toward the shelters. Rourke realized too late? No. The Harbinger feinted left, then broke past him in a sudden burst of speed, racing toward the underground entrance. Verkal infantry poured in behind it, cutting off the Thrin defenders. Rourke gunned Cerberus's thrusters, leaping forward to block the approach. The Harbinger swung its blade in a vicious arc, sparks spraying as it clashed against Cerberus's guard. The two machines locked together inches from the shelter's armored doors inside the cockpit. Rourke's breath came hard and fast. He knew he couldn't hold this position forever. The Harbinger leaned closer, its voice a whisper through the comms. I'll take them one by one, Rourke, and I'll make you watch. Rage flared hot in his chest. With a roar, he drove Cerberus's knee upward, slamming into the Harbinger's torso and forcing it back. A quick burst from the wrist cannons followed. Punching holes into the black armor, the Harbinger staggered, but did not fall. Instead, it slowly straightened, the red glow along its frame burning brighter in the rain. Better, it said quietly. Don't make me bored again. Before Rourke could press the attack, the Harbinger triggered another pulse. Static screamed through Cerberus's systems, blinding him for precious seconds. When the vision cleared, the black machine was gone once more. leaving only the battered street and the distant sound of retreating Vorkal, the Thryn. Commander's voice crackled over the comms. "It's playing with you, Captain." Rourke's gaze stayed on the empty street ahead, because it doesn't want to win yet. It wants the last fight to be worth it. The sky over Thryn was no longer the deep black of space. It burned red, streaked with the light of incoming warships. The Vorkal armada had returned in full force, and this time they weren't alone. From the highest tower of the city's battered defenses, the Thryn commander watched in silence. Dozens of massive silhouettes emerged from hyperspace, each one bristling with weapons, but at the center of the formation was a shape that made even the Vorkal ships seem small. An enormous obsidian carrier, its surface rippling with faint red light. The Harbinger's flagship in the streets below, Cerberus stood ready. Rourke had stripped away all non-essential systems, rerouting every bit of power into weapons and shields. Armor plates, mismatched from battlefield scavenging, gave the machine a rough, patchwork look. The Thryn diplomat approached him for what might be the last time. "If you fight now, you may not return." Rourke didn't look at her. His hands rested on the controls. "I never planned to." High above the enemy. Descended. Vorkal landing craft split away from the main formation, deploying their warriors in great waves, but they didn't charge immediately. They held their ground, forming a perimeter around the plaza. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the Harbinger descended from its carrier. It landed without a sound, the rain hissing against its armor. It didn't speak at first, only studied Cerberus like a predator, sizing up its prey. Finally, the comms crackled. "This is where it ends, Rourke." "No," Rourke said quietly. "This is where it should have ended years ago." The Harbinger stepped forward and the Vorkal soldiers withdrew, clearing the space between them. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, they collided. The impact shook the plaza. Blades screamed as they met, sparks cascading into the rain. Rourke fought like a man with nothing left to lose, driving Cerberus forward with punishing blows. The Harbinger matched him strike for strike, its speed and precision almost inhuman. Around them, the Vorkal forces stayed still, watching their two champions fight. It was no longer a war between armies. It was a duel to decide everything. Rourke's missiles struck true, tearing into the Harbinger's left arm. Black armor shattered, revealing the pale, scarred metal beneath. The Harbinger didn't falter. Instead, it drove its blade deep into Cerberus's side, alarms screaming in Rourke's cockpit. The two machines locked together again, grinding against each other with the sound of tearing steel. The Harbinger's voice was low, almost calm. "You've grown stronger, but strength is never enough." Rourke gritted his teeth. "You're right." His hand slammed a covered switch, one he had kept for this exact moment. Deep within Cerberus, a hidden system came online. The machine's core flared white-hot, flooding its frame with raw energy. Every joint, every weapon, every strike became faster, heavier, more brutal. The next hit knocked the Harbinger to the ground. Rourke didn't hesitate. He drove Cerberus forward, blade first. The Harbinger caught the strike, metal screaming as the two locked again. But this time, Rourke kept pressing, forcing it back inch by inch. Lightning flashed above, reflecting off their armor. In that moment, both machines looked less like soldiers and more like ancient gods locked in their final battle. Far above, in the safety of their ships, the Vorkal commanders watched in silence. Whoever won here would decide the fate of the planet, maybe more. The Harbinger's eyes glowed brighter, its voice a cold whisper. "If I fall, I will take you with me." Rourke's reply was just as quiet. "Good, then we finish it together." Dow, with a final roar, both machines lunged, their blades crossing in a blinding arc of light. The world vanished in the flash.